Hi. I thought it was about time that I shared my chronic fatigue story. I'm going to do it in bits. And today I'm going to really talk about the precipitating factors, the things that led and contributed to me developing chronic fatigue. We're all different. We all have different genes. We all live in different environments, the city or the country, or exposed to different chemicals, toxins, radio waves, frequencies. We live in different family situations. We have different experiences. We eat differently. Culturally, we're different in terms of how driven we are, or what the work expectation is, how much leave people take, all of those kinds of things. And they all play into the development of chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue does not happen overnight. Often there is an event that is like the straw that breaks the proverbial camel's back. And often, and I'll talk a bit more about this later, that's a viral infection. But leading up to that, there's a whole lot of stuff that happened over years and even decades that contributed to moving your body and your nervous system, your immune system into a state where chronic fatigue developed. So today I'm going to talk about what happened for me in the hope that that gives you some insight into what may be contributing to chronic fatigue, or in fact, chronic illness for you. And of course, I'm doing it with the benefit of hindsight and a lot of deep diving and investigation. And so hindsight is always 2020, right? Some of these things I did know at the time. Some of these things I look back and go, aha, light bulb, right, I can see how that played into it. Okay, so I'll start back at the beginning. I grew up in a family that has got some autoimmune disease history. So there is cancer in the family, there is rheumatoid arthritis in the family. And I do believe that one day chronic fatigue syndrome will actually be classified as an autoimmune condition. Certainly, people with chronic fatigue sometimes have other conditions as well, and you will know that you symptom collect a little bit. Not as much fun as gathering Easter eggs, but you symptom collect a little bit, and sometimes you can get more and more diagnoses like POTS or fibromyalgia. So I do think there is an autoimmune component to it. I'm not a medical doctor. I got to say that. Always check with your GP. That's my personal opinion. And so there's a bit of a tendency there. I also grew up in a family that were very achievement oriented and very focused and very academically driven. So in my family, there wasn't necessarily a lot of feeling and emotion. You didn't necessarily express yourself, and it wasn't a comfortable thing to do. It was really about cognitive and academic one-upmanship. So there's nothing wrong with that, right? But me personally, I was and I am a very sensitive soul. And it's not about what happens to you, it's about how your body responds. And my body is a beautifully, wonderfully sensitive body. And so my body responded to pressure and to this real achievement driven orientation by I pushed myself very, very hard, and my body responded by really experiencing and holding that stress and indeed trauma. I didn't feel wholly comfortable in the family that I grew up in. I always felt like a black sheep, and I thought that I was adopted. I look far too much like my mum, so it wasn't a strong likelihood at all. And we do have some of the same characteristics as well. So I wasn't adopted, but I felt really different. I interacted with the world in a very different way. And a lot of things really hurt me. I really took them to heart. I was very emotional in that, which is nothing wrong with that again, but in that I didn't really learn to become emotionally regulated as a young child. And what I did is I really adopted the strategy of empathy to help keep myself safe and to help me feel safe. So I would check in with where everybody was at. I would feel into them, feel where they were at emotionally, feel where they were energetically, and then I would adjust myself in accordance with that so that I could predict their behavior and therefore alter mine to keep me feeling safe. So I used empathy as a safety strategy. Now, again, nothing wrong with that. You're a child. You develop whatever strategies you need to develop in order to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel appreciated, to feel seen. It's just that some of these strategies, you outgrow them and they cease to be very useful as an adult. So the other strategies I adopted were really pushing myself really hard to try and achieve, which was a struggle. Well, it wasn't a struggle. I was considered the least intelligent person in my family, and that was really quite well known. It didn't turn out that way, but as a child, being told those messages, it makes you want to prove yourself more and gain approval. So I had quite a low self-worth. And honestly, because I'd spent so much time empathing and feeling into people, I didn't really know what I felt like. I didn't really know who I was. I was wearing others' wants and needs and energy so much that I really lost touch and lost contact and connection with my own wants, needs, desires, likes, and dislikes. So that was sort of my upbringing. And I did have some childhood experiences that were deeply traumatic for me, um, not necessarily in the family, but outside the family. And that really stuck with me for a long time. And it's funny because some of them I didn't even really connect the dots until the last couple of years. I remember one incident, we were throwing monkey apples, which are tiny little apples at cars, and as kids, because that's what you do in the country, right? And the guy stopped. He got out, he opened his boot, he pulled out an axe, and he said, "I'm effing gonna come and kill you kids if you ever do this again. And don't tell your parents because I'll know and I'll kill you." And that freaked me out, understandably. And from then on, I actually had nightmares about someone sneaking into our house and killing everybody in the house. Um, Almost every night, actually. So that really affected the quality of my sleep, and it made me feel unsafe at home, and it made me feel unsafe as a person sleeping, trying to sleep. So that's just one example. And again, it's how the body remembers. It's not what happens, it's how the body remembers. So there was that. So throughout my life, let's say I was chronically stressed because I was always putting pressure on myself to do better, to achieve more. I was pretty good at sport, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to win, not to enjoy necessarily, which I did enjoy it, but there was also this layer of winning and wanting to win as well, to gain approval from people whose opinion I cared about. So I've got lots of lots of stressors growing up. And then as an adult, I was under chronic stress for a while. I was the sole income in my family, and so that put a extra layer of pressure on me. And I was also a teacher, secondary school teacher, which is a hell of a job. It is full on. It is like running a 100-meter sprint, but instead of doing it for 10 or 15 seconds, it was all day, and then you get to the end of the day and completely exhausted. And I was exhausted every weekend, without a doubt. And on the holidays, I'd spend the first week of my holidays being absolutely exhausted. And then the second week, I'd feel myself come back, and I would start to grieve that I hadn't felt myself for so long. So it was relentless pressure. So I was overworking, I was undersleeping, I was perfectionist driven, I was a people pleaser, I was overgiving. So I was giving to people and they didn't even want anything, like that's just what I did. Um, and and this is hilarious, I took a job I didn't want, right? I took a job I didn't want. It was a teaching at primary school, which was really, I mean, I could do it, but I also needed to do a lot more study and revision because I'd been at high school. So there's a lot of stuff I needed to learn and a few things I needed to upskill on and stuff like that. And it's also quite a different environment to high school. So it was getting used to all that. Primary schools, they use a totally different language to the language that high schools use. So I had to learn a new language as well and learn to communicate in a different way. So hilarious, took a job I didn't want. And I knew that, and that was conscious. That was a conscious decision, right? The other thing I was doing is I was like, damn it, everybody else seems to be able to work in, and do all the things they love on the weekend. Why can't I? You know what? I'm going to ignore being tired. Conscious decision, right? I'm going to override my body and do what I want to do anyway. And I'm going to train for an adventure race and I'm going to do it. And so that's what I did. I got up every morning at 6:15, went for a run, went for a swim, whatever, went to work, came home, did something else. So I consciously chose to override my body. I know, I'm such a twat. Anyway, so that's another thing that I did. And on top of those chronic stresses, the pressures that I was placing on myself, no one else was placing them on me, although there was quite a bit of pressure from work, to be honest. I was putting these pressures on myself and consciously choosing to ignore my body and to do things I didn't want to do. I know I don't know what I was thinking. I clearly wasn't thinking very straight. In addition to that, I had some acutely stressful events. My uncle died. One of my old friends died, and my teaching mentor, who was just wonderful, also died unexpectedly. So that was pretty uncool. And my best friend as well. One of my best friends died too. And because I was chronically stressed, so I just didn't have the headspace to really honestly deal with all the grief, and I didn't know how to do grief. I don't think anybody necessarily does. It's one of those things that you learn by doing. And yeah, it was just really tough. It was really tough. And then I had a few physical triggers. So I got and the other thing I would want to add here in terms of my history, I had a lot of antibiotic use as a child because I had ear infection. So I was really overly antibiotic, which we know destroys our gut biome. And a healthy gut biome is one of the foundations for a healthy life. Okay, 60% of our immune system at least is housed in our gut. A lot of our good positive neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, majority of them are synthesized in the gut. So my guts were a train wreck. Okay, but you don't know what you don't know. I also had mono, also called glandular fever, also called Epstein-Barr, when I was 14 or 15. And that particular viral infection actually kind of hides out in your body and waits. It bides its time for another opportunity. So it's a real opportunist viral infection. But anyway, and then I had a viral infection. I remember I was off work for a couple of weeks and I just didn't quite manage to recover from that. And the first thing that started to happen was my sleep cycle got completely messed up. So I started having trouble going to sleep, which I did have trouble anyway, because my brain would loop around. I'd be thinking of all my students and all the things that I could do for them and all the things I needed to do and check in with this. And like I'd write a to-do list in my head. I call it brain fucking myself because honestly, that's what I was doing. And I couldn't stop it. I could not stop the busyness. Like I tried and it would just flick back on again and I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I often woke up at 2 a.m. and then I'd be wide awake until about 4:30 to 5, and then I'd go back to sleep and my alarm would go off at 6:15 and I'd have to go into work again. So I wasn't getting the rest that I need. And when you sleep, that's when your body does the restoration, the repair, a lot of digestion. It heals the gut wall lining. It flushes, the cerebrospinal fluid in your brain. All of that stuff, all the good stuff happens when you are resting and in a deeply parasympathetic state. So that was not happening for me. My cortisol was peaking at night, keeping me awake, and my melatonin was low at night, which was stopping me going from sleep. And then in the morning, my melatonin would go up and my cortisol would go down, which is the opposite to what we want happening. So I would wake up groggy, exhausted, feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. About that time, too, I got a headache, and that headache lasted a little over a year. And the other thing that happened is I got what I call twitchy eye. So I know when I've overdone it a bit much or I'm overstimulated because it still happens now. It's like my towel, I get twitchy eye. And I had twitchy eye also for about a year. It's quite hard to sleep when your little eyelid is just like twitching like this. So I had twitchy eye as well. And I started having I wouldn't say it was a sore throat, but it was a feeling in my throat. And that is also another tell. When I get tired, I get a little tight feeling here, still to this day. So those are my two tells. I don't have chronic fatigue anymore. I don't have any of the other symptoms that I had, but those are my two tells that say, hey, Anaya, you need to stop, you need to chill out, you need to rest, relax, restore, calm down. Okay, so basically, I started collecting symptoms, brain frog, brain frog. That's so ironic. Brain frog. I remember looking at an orange and I knew that the orange was called the same thing as the color, but honestly, I could not think of what it actually was. I couldn't think of it. I lost the capacity really to emotionally regulate as well. Often when I play board games with my husband, I always win, like Scrabble, whatever, around the world, I always win. And when I had chronic fatigue, he won. And I burst out crying. I was so deeply upset by it. I mean, it's funny the different things that really set us off, but that really set me off and made me really realize that something really not great was going on here. So I started collecting more and more symptoms, and then I couldn't drive myself to work. I couldn't focus enough to drive, and I didn't feel safe driving because I couldn't attend all these different stimulus. But I still went to work. I know. I'm such a twat. It's so silly. Anyway, so my husband was driving me to work and picking me up from work. You'd think the penny would have dropped by now. And then eventually I went to the doctor and I'm like, I just need a week off work. Didn't help. I just need 2 weeks off work. Didn't help. He's like, you need more than that. I'm like, no, just another 2 weeks. Just give me another 2 weeks. He's like, you need more than that. You'll be back. You'll be back in 2 weeks. No, I won't. No, I bloody won't. And I came back and I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue. And he said to me that line that we all hear, 95% of people don't recover. And I said, well, fuck that. I'm one of the 5%. And I never went back. And I mean, he was a great doctor. He diagnosed me very quickly. But then his next offer was, do you need antidepressants or anti-anxiolytics? And I'm like, I'm not depressed. I just need some sleep. I need some restoration. And I wasn't. So that was okay. That was a good decision for me. But that's all doctors are taught, right? And I want to dispel this myth of 95%. It is not true. It is not true. It is based on a pacing study from, I think it's the 1950s, that was later discredited because they fiddled with the data. okay? And that is the only intervention that they used was pacing, right? Pacing your exercise. They didn't know about any of this other stuff then. They didn't do any of this other stuff then. So that statistic is a load of bollocks, and it's absolutely 100% not applicable to you. We know so much more now. The other thing is, it's been hard, and it's only really been the last few years that the good stories have been getting out there. So there are plenty of good stories, and you can heal from this. You can recover fully and completely. You can have a better, richer life. And that is the message that I want you to really, really hear. You just have to decide to do it, to claim your health, to decide that you're worth it, and you can do this. I'm not saying that it's easy. It's not. It requires commitment. It requires prioritization. It requires learning to be your own best friend. It requires putting yourself first, putting your health first. It requires doing whatever you need to do to make it happen. And it's not about right and wrong. It's about what works and what doesn't work. One thing doesn't work very well for you, fine, try another thing. There are plenty of things that you can try. And what I do now with the program that I run is I don't just want you to recover. I want you to create a foundation for recovery, but also for ongoing health and wellness. And that is so important for me. And that is why I cover a really comprehensive and holistic range of things, from what you eat, how you move, how you interact with the world, the boundaries that you have for yourself, how you treat yourself, your beliefs, your behaviors, your habits, neural retraining, harnessing joy, creative visualization. It all feeds into creating a life for yourself again that you will love and that is sustainable, where you can thrive. And it is 100% possible. And it starts with you choosing to believe that, right? You have to choose it. You have to choose to believe it. We're adults, right? We're adults now. We can choose to believe whatever we want. We make our beliefs okay for ourselves. We make it okay to you can believe two seemingly different things. For example, I believe in miracles because if I don't, they won't happen. And why not? Why can't I have a miracle happen to myself? No reason. But I'm also really into science. They're not mutually exclusive. They can coexist because I decide they can coexist, and I'm perfectly comfortable and okay with working body, mind, and spirit. So anyway, I hope that talking about my precipitating factors, the things that fed into me developing chronic fatigue, is helpful for you. In the next edition, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the progression of chronic fatigue, the things that I experienced, what helped me, what served me, the kind of attitudes and beliefs that I adopted, and a little bit more about my journey. Okay. If you're interested, please visit my website, anayaspiley.com, book a free connect call with me, and we can chat about what's next for you. And you will come away from that call with some things that you can immediately act on and put in place to support your recovery, your ongoing health and well-being. Take good care.